This past Tuesday was a fateful day. In the morning, we celebrated the funeral of Charles Jones. Everyone called him Chip, and he was only 65 years of age. And Chip was a dear friend of mine for almost 40 years, and he was a very quiet philanthropist supporting so many Catholic causes throughout the diocese. And then that evening, we learned that Father Bob Pirelli, one of our weekend priests here at St. Joseph University Church for over 25 years, died suddenly at the age of 73. Not only was he one of our weekend assistants, but he had a psychotherapy practice that helped literally thousands of people reclaim their lives. Neither of these deaths were expected, as both men seemed to be healthy and in the prime of their lives. So my reflection today, while not being a eulogy, has certainly been impacted by their lives and our loss. Great Expectations, Charles Dickens' 13th novel, was first serialized in All the Year Round, a journal published by Dickens himself. It ran from December of 1860 to August of 1861, publishing 59 chapters in 36 weeks. Great Expectation, one of Charles Dickens' later novels, appeared in the years of his confirmed success as a writer. Now, I mention this novel precisely because of its title, which I think can be borrowed and applied to the scripture readings we have heard today, and even amplified to greatest expectations. Our second reading from the letter to the Hebrews gives us perhaps the best and most distinct definition of faith ever, and in fact, the only definition of faith in the entire Bible. It says this, quote, "Faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen." This 11th chapter of Hebrews then outlines the following characteristics of faith: the knowledge of unseen realities, a generous response to God's call, endurance in the face of suffering and death, and hopeful trust in God's promises. In other words, grounding our present life in the promise of the kingdom God is preparing for us, or rather, God is preparing us for. Grounding our lives in the greatest expectations. Jesus tells us to be confident of this as we hear his first words in today's gospel. "Do not be afraid any longer, little flock, for your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom." Perhaps the Hebrew word that best describes what Jesus is saying is hesed. Many biblical words such as mercy, compassion, love, grace, and faithfulness relate to this Hebrew word hesed, but none of them completely summarize the concept. Hesed is not merely an emotion or feeling, but it involves action on behalf of someone who is in need. Hesed describes a sense of love and loyalty that inspires merciful and compassionate behavior towards another. Hesed, found some 250 times in the Hebrew Scriptures, expresses an essential part of God's character. When God appeared to Moses to give the law a second time, he described himself as abounding in or filled with hesed, which is translated as love and faithfulness, unfailing love, steadfast love. The core idea of this term communicates loyalty or faithfulness within a relationship, a living relationship. As it relates to the concept of love, Hesed expressed God's faithfulness to God's people. In other words, love comes first, and that everything is grace. Everything is gift. We are called to recognize that our life is entirely a gift, and then we are called to make it a gift to others. Jesus' words also indicates that he knows that the opposite of faith is fear. When we reverse faith, we think we can earn God's love, we can merit God's love, and focusing on ourselves, fear arises. Fear cuts us off from God and from one another, causing us to live in the opposite way, clinging, grasping, battling for supremacy. Fear even breeds violence. Faith, on the other hand, is productive, generative, life-giving, not only to the one with faith, but for all those around them. The letter to the Hebrews gives us a prime example of such a person in Abraham, saying, "By faith he journeyed in the promised land as in a foreign territory. By faith he received the power to generate, even though he was past the normal age, for he thought that the one had made the promise was trustworthy." Jesus calls all of us to this same kind of faith, focusing on what is beyond this world while making a difference for those around us in this world. Sell your belongings and give alms, Jesus says. Provide money bags for yourselves that do not wear out, an inexhaustible treasure in heaven that no thief can reach nor moth destroy. For where your treasure is, there also will be your heart. And so we find ourselves in this rich and beautiful world that God has given us, but a world in which nothing is inexhaustible, a world in which everything eventually fades. Well, actually, there's one thing in this world that is inexhaustible, and that is our heart, our soul. So we have experiences of truth, beauty, joy, peace, and love. And each time we experience these things, we want more. More truth, more beauty, more joy, more peace, more love. Because what we want, whether we can articulate it or not, is the source of all that truth, beauty, joy, peace, and love. The source of all this, who is God. St. Augustine said it hundreds of years ago, "Our hearts are made for you, O Lord, and they will not rest until they rest in you." We can't imagine what God has prepared for us. St. Paul tells us this. He says, "Eye has not seen, ear has not heard what God has ready for those who love God." Now, I learned in the 4th grade at St. Mary's School on the Hill in Lancaster a hymn that expresses all of this so clearly and succinctly. It's entitled "Spirit Seeking Light and Beauty," and it's been my favorite hymn ever since. And I'm going to ask Paul to sing this hymn after communion, but I want to read the text to you now. It says this: "Spirit seeking light and beauty, heart that longest for thy rest, soul that asketh understanding, only thus can you be blessed. Through the vastness of creation, though your restless thought may roam, God is all that you can long for. God is all his creatures' home. Taste and see him, feel and hear him, hope and grasp his unseen hand. Though the darkness seem to hide him, faith and love can understand. God, who lovest all thy creatures, all our hearts are known to thee. Lead us through the land of shadows to thy blessed eternity." Jesus invites us to invest our hearts in treasure that will last, to journey through this world living with the hesed of God, to live with a sense of love and loyalty that inspires merciful and compassionate behavior towards others, to live like our friends Chip Jones and Father Bob Pirelli, who now experience the fulfillment of their greatest expectations.